Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today. As I said, all the way from Germany is Dr. Klaus Reithmayer, who is born and is living in Bavaria, Germany. He's married and has two lovely daughters. And actually, his diploma is in mineralogy. And he has a PhD thesis in high pressure crystallography. He has more than 20 years experience in electrochemistry in both lab and process, and has been with Xylem and WTW since 2001. And Dr. Klaus is currently the Senior Product Manager for Lab Echem Products and OxiTop. And of course, OxiTop is our main topic for today.
The basic is that we have the microorganisms that need oxygen for the metabolism when they digest the diluted carbons in wastewater or in soil or wherever they have. And the principle is simply they're using oxygen and form carbon dioxide. And because we are measuring these tests in closed vessels, we have to do something to measure the amount of carbon dioxide, and this is simply done by a chemical reaction, because we have in small quivers inside the bottles, we have some sodium hydroxide, and the sodium hydroxide absorbs the carbon dioxide and forming a solid precipitation. And this solid precipitation leads to a pressure decrease in the bottle, and in this we use the pressure decrease as a measure for the carbon dioxide which is digested. This is the basic principle of the respirometry in closed vessels. And as I said, we had a very successful product in the past. It was the OxiTop control. We had it since 1997, but of course, you know, this product was almost 23 years old when we took it from the market, because, and you know, electronic parts are no longer available for this, and we had to do something new on this. We had in the past two different possibilities. So we had the one product which was mainly designed for BOD measurement. This was the OC110, which was intended to have an easy BOD measurement for people who have to measure big amounts of BOD and want to download the data to a computer program. The second one, what we had, was a very general, a mighty tool, because with the possibilities to not only to measure BOD, but also to do special tests by adjusting different parameters according to the needs of the customer. And the most important parameter, and this is the pressure P, which allows a free measurement in a certain range, because this can be used not only for under pressure measurement, but also for over pressure measurement, which is intended, for instance, for anaerobic digesting tests. Okay, almost 23 years were gone, so we had to do something new, and what we did is, as you will see it now, we have introduced the OxiTop IDS. And those who are a little bit familiar with the IDS family from WTW, this is the IDS stands for Intelligent Digital Sensors. That means we have in our Echem portfolio, we have sensors which are no longer analog sensors, but they have some electronics, and they are doing all the measurement, and the ready measurement is transferred to a meter. You can still say meter, but in fact, the measurement takes place in the sensor. And we now integrated these OxiTop IDS also into that family. And it looks like this, and the meter looks like this. So we have two different heads, and I will explain a bit what it is. So we have, on the one hand, for all, let's say, normal degradation tests, we have the classical, or we have an OxiTop IDS head, which is intended for soil respiration, for for aerobic degradation of any part or of any samples. The OxiTop IDS/B is especially designed for measuring biogas, and you will see later on in this presentation why we do there a little or why we differentiated this head from the other head. But you see, in comparison to the old heads, that we have a small display in that head. We have some buttons more, and of course we have a wireless connection to the heads. Well, we are using our multimeters for this test, and I will just introduce a little bit the system, especially also for those who have some experience in the past with the OxiTop C system. But I want also, of course, to share the information with those people who are not familiar with our products, and I will show a bit of these special meters because they have a lot of capabilities. So we have on the one hand the OxiTop IDS capability that we can control and program the heads for the respirometric measurement. We have a modern structure of the menu, and we can of course switch between EChem applications and OxiTop. These meters are also used for EChem investigation for measuring pH, conductivity, and so on. And you can do this with the same meter. You can start your OxiTop measurement, and after that you switch back to the EChem mode and you can measure pH. So it's really a real multi-instrument. Then we have, of course, inside these meter, we have the comprehensive function. We have the BOD measurement, we have this BOD special measurement with adjustment of different parameters, and of course the pressure. We have a modern data acquisition, which is also very important today because we have the possibility to read out the data on a USB memory stick. We have a special multi-lab importer where we can directly download the data from the meter to a PC and use the data for further processing. And in comparison to the old system, which had to use an RS-232 adapter to USB, of course, these times are gone. We have modern USB connections to a computer. This is a short overview what we can do. So we can measure the BOD in a time span between half an hour and up to 180 days. The standard BOD, of course, for all people who are measuring BOD, we are measuring according to the standards. You know that the respirometric BOD is a so-called proposed method. It's not the official method, it's a proposed method, but we are working according to all standards who suggest these measures. And we have the BOD special, which allows special tests if people want to adjust the volume, if they want to adjust if they want to do dilution series, for instance, for measuring BOD of industrial wastewater. Industrial wastewater, as I told in the beginning, can have BOD values up to 40,000 milligrams per liter and more. So you have to dilute, and there's a routine which allows you an easy dilution because the instrument says you how do you have to dilute to adjust the corresponding measuring range. And of course, this very mighty pressure tool, which allows the measurement of pressure and for any applications of biological degradation. And you can see we have the normal OxiTop IDS, which has a range between 500 and 250 1250 hectopascal, and for BOD, for biogas, we extended this range to 1500 hectopascal, just to have a bit more convenience in operating, because after a certain time, of course, you have to release the pressure. I want just want to now give an idea how we handle the samples, because this is a very important thing when you are working with an OxiTop IDS system. We have a hierarchy, which is, if you once have understood how this works, you will have a very easy access for all samples, or for all samples you are working on. So the first hierarchy is always the set. And in the set, you do all the definition, what you are doing. Are you doing a BOD? Are you doing a measurement, or what else? Here you set the measurement period, you set the so-called auto temp function, you set also the wireless availability. I will come to this later. And you can simply think of it as that what you're measuring. Let's say you have a sample of 6 bottles, which is all running this, where you're running the same test, and you want, for instance, to run a BOD, then you will have normally samples for the inlet, samples for the outlet, and you are have these together on one steering platform. So the next thing is the sample itself. The sample is simply the bottle, including the heads. And this is the subpart. And here you are defining, for instance, for a BOD, are you measuring the inlet or the outlet? So you set for your sample the measuring range you want to have, and you can define this very individually, whatever your needs are. And then below the sample, you have the head. The head sits on the sample bottle, and this is the measuring unit which belongs to one sample. So set, sample, head. This is the hierarchy where you are working with and where you get later on your data. And of course, especially for the sample, you will have some statistical averaging. You can ignore this. This will be done in the background automatically, but you, of course, if you say you want to ignore this, no problem. It's just an information. What is an advantage is that you can program the heads before you start the measurement. Then you can simply put the meter to the side, finish your preparations, then screw on the heads, and then start the measurement. So how much can we handle? So we can, each meter can handle up to 100 heads. And these 100 heads, they could consist of maximum 12 sets. Yeah? You can have in a set maximum 12 samples, and each sample can have maximum 12 IDS heads. So of course, you have to make sure that you do not exceed in total 100 heads, but you see these are the different degrees of freedom you have. So you have to adjust accordingly to the number of heads, your sets, your samples, and your IDS heads. Then for individual settings, you can, of course, define a set name. Normally, you have a default and you have an index which is counted or which will where the count will increase if you are preparing more sets at one day. So you can easily differentiate them by the date and by the index number, which is automatically adjusted. But of course, you are also free to adjust your own sample descriptions if you want, or your own set description, excuse me. So the sample, which is the next thing, then you have also the possibility to define your sample description. You have also an automatic index, which is increasing, and then you do all the different settings for your sample. For instance, if you have an inlet of a municipal wastewater treatment plant, you will have normally if you're using the 510 milliliter bottles which we supply, you will have a sample volume of 164 milliliters. If you wanted to have a threefold determination, then you will have 3 bottles filled with 164 milliliters. for the inlet and for the outlet, where you will have a low BOD of maximum 40 milligrams per liter. Normally you have less. You will have a volume of 432 milliliters, and this is what you adjust in the different samples. Here you can see, for instance, this looks like a certain sample where you have your sample ID, you have your serial number, and so on. So this is just an overview. Okay, what we have, because we are using a wireless system, of course, what you want to have is a long battery lifetime. And this is what you can do in the settings. So we are invented a power saving mode. And this power saving mode, this is the time where you can access the heads automatically. That means you are defining a time span. You can see, for instance, a radio connection on this right display, a time between 8 and 12 o'clock each day, where you can access the heads automatically. And then in that time, you can read out the data, you can see the intermediate results, what you want. So this is something which has a big impact on the battery lifetime. You will see this on the next slide. Because if you switch off the eco mode, that would mean that you have a 24/7 availability of the heads. This is normally not necessary, because if you're working in the lab, you know you have your fixed routines where you look after your experiments, and normally we'll look at midnight at the experiment. Normally you get in the morning and you have a certain time where you are controlling the experiments. So if you would switch it off, you would have a 100 days continuous battery power. If you set the availability to 3 hours per day, you will have 2 years of continuous power. This is a lot. And if you will go to half an hour per day, then this would result in a 5 years continuous power. Of course, the maximum measuring interval which you can set is 180 days. After that time, the measurement is stopped, and this is also reasonable. I know that, for instance, you have some measurements like degradation in seawater, where these experiments run often more than half a year. But of course, it's important that you can check your experiments from time to time. That makes sense that you have these automatic break after 180 days. I will just give an idea how to program a set. So this is a set. You create a new set, then you define your measuring mode, whatever you want to do, BOD, pressure, or whatever. You can adjust the set name, you can adjust the duration, and then you can go to the settings, and the settings will, for instance, also show you that what I have just in the last slide. You can do the auto temp function. You can set a differential pressure, which is a certain alarm if you're measuring, for instance, biogas. You should have a certain threshold where you say, okay, now I have to release the pressure. Then you can switch on the blinking LED on the head and so on. And of course, you can set the availability. After that, you return to the window again, and then you have the sample button. And if you press the sample button, then you will go to the adjustment for the different samples. And then you can define all the sample names. Whatever you have 8 characters available, you can do some calculations, for instance, in the case of a BOD special. Then you see some information on that, what are you trying to measure. You have, these are the settings for your sample, and then you go to the measuring head. And if you have pressure this button measuring head, excuse me, this is just a short excursion to the measuring range where you can do some settings if you have, in case of a BOD special, which is a bit complicated, but wherever you have big degrees of freedom, you have a lot of adjustment, of course, to do to get reasonable results. But it's described. So then you go back to the head, and then you simply you simply assign a head to that measurement, and you see this menu if you go on the head, and then you have to press the right button on your head, and then until the LED of this head flashes, and then you will see that this will turn from gray to black, and you simply accept this head with a pressure on the enter button. So then you have allocated this specific head to your sample and of course to your set. And this is something which you repeat for all your samples and all the heads you want to have in your set. And then, of course, if you want to have a new sample, you do the same again. So it's quite easy. If you have done this once, you know it for all the time. Why we have these big amount of possibilities. I have one example, for instance, for a set for an OECD 301F. So you have where I simply assumed a double determination. I will show you how many heads or how many samples you have in this head. So you have, for instance, a sample with substance you want to see and the seed. Then you have the sample, of course, something like a blind value. So you have only the substance, only the seed, but no substance. So you see the influence of the seed. Then you have the pure dilution water, which is something consisting of different salts. Then you have the so-called abiotic control. That means you are adding copper sulfide, for instance, to make sure that there's in this abiotic control, there's no microorganisms which can falsificate your results. That makes, if you have 4 samples, you have at least 8 heads, and there you understand why we have these big degrees of freedom for setting different samples for your tests. Then the measurement itself to be started is very simple. Once you have finished all the preparation, you have screwed on the heads and you put them now into your incubator, then you will start the measurement simply by pressing the enter button, and then you don't have to take care anymore. Everything is running automatically. The measurement has been started. Now the heads are only available for a certain time in case that you want to stop again because you have done something special. But normally you don't have to do anything anymore. And now this experiment is running and you can simply switch off the meter after that and use the meter, for instance, for EChem tests. If you want to get data, then simply you go to the head again. You can call up the data. You can view the samples. You can see how many heads are responding. You can see the curves already. So, for instance, this is good for quality to make sure that your tests are running quite nice and you have no disturbances or no interferences. So you should have curves like this. If you see a curve like that, you know that you have a problem, but you can then, of course, you can do something. You can take out, for instance, this sample. You can you have the possibility to check what's on. And of course, you can read out the data. You can use it by read out them with a USB stick directly from the meter, or you can import that to Excel, and you can see how it looks like. This is an example where you get the printout. So you see, for instance, all the data which are provided by the system. These are your settings, and then you see below the results from the different heads and also with the different IDs. So this is a very convenient way that you get your results and you can use, for instance, here you see the milligram per liter. So we have chosen this, in this case, a BOD measurement. So you get directly the readout of the BOD in milligram per liter. Of course, now we want to step a bit to the different applications, just to show you what we can cover. So the BOD and the aerobic degradation, that means OECD testing. OECD 301F is nothing but a certain test, which is, let's say, a 28-day BOD. So we can use these different kind of settings of sets. The head is always the same. The head is the most important part, and then we have different vessels to be adjusted to the different applications. So you can do BOD measurement with this setting, but also the OECD testing. And then we have special sets for special degradations, aerobic degradations. For instance, if you have a good degradation, of course, you need a bigger volume of gas phase about this. So we provide bottles with 1 liter, and this would be if you have, for instance, some substances which are very, very good degradable. If you have poor degradability, then of course you can adjust simply this by using small bottles. We provide, for instance, also 250 milliliter bottles. This is intended if you have some products or some things which are very badly digesting. And how does it look like, for instance, for an OECD 301F? Here you see an example of 1 octanol. So the one criteria is that you have a degradation of 60% within 10 days. This is the so-called lag phase. That means that the bacteria have to adjust to or to adapt to the sample. And once this has the degradation has started, then you define this time window of 10 days after after the lag phase. And within this time window, you have to have a degradation of at least 60% that you know this is a good degradable substance. And of course, you have to consider also the oxygen depletion and the dilution and the blank water. And this has to be 60 milligrams after 28 days, just to make sure that the dilution water does not contribute to the degradation of your substance. The next thing, which is a very important, is the soil respiration. Soil respiration is, of course, something which is where we are looking at solids, and according to the activity of the soils, we have also different vessels I will show here. So if you have a low activity, you have sandy soil or something like that, and we will not expect too much activity, but to have a good sharpening of the results, it's good to have small vessels. If you have medium and high activity of your soil, then you should consider to have bigger vessels, and for instance, that you have something special, which is so-called biomechanically treated waste, which is a product which looks quite similar to soil, but has a certain respiratory activity after the treatment. And before it can be put on a dump site, you have to make sure that the activity of this product is as low as possible. And for this, you need a very big vessels, because normally these activity of these treated waste exceeds the activity of normal soils. This is a typical pressure curve. Of course, it's not in one part. So it's you have from time, it could be the possibility that you have to aerate in between. That means that you have to open the vessel to put fresh air in and then to restart the measurement. But once you have finished the test, then you simply put these curves together, and here you see a classical pressure decrease over the time of a soil sample. Of course, then after that, you have to do a lot of mathematics, because soil, there are a lot of standards worldwide which describe exactly the treatment of soil in respiration tests. I think Dr. Tao has put a nice list of literature together, where you can also find some white papers of people who did soil examinations and soil respiratory examinations with OxiTop, so you have an idea how to handle this. Last not least, the anaerobic measurements and biogas measurements. So this is why we have these OxiTop IDS Set. So we have an extended pressure range for more convenience. And of course, we have also added special safety. That means as soon as we are at 1500 hectopascal, the heads will start blinking red, that you know there is a high pressure in this bottle. The bottles itself, which we are providing, are tested on overpressure, and I can tell you that you normally will not break them. But of course, you have to take a lot of precautions if you're opening a bottle which is under pressure, and you should take the care. We have a lot of advices in our manual. These are the special bottles for manipulating the samples, and you will see why we have these special nozzles here, because if you are measuring methane, for instance, you are not in biogas testing, you are not only developing methane, you are also developing some carbon dioxide. And after the test, you want to know how big is the amount of carbon dioxide and how big is the amount of methane. And finally, you have here some septum, and you put with a syringe some sodium hydroxide into this quiver. And after a certain time, you will see a pressure decrease, because then the carbon dioxide is precipitated as sodium hydroxide, sodium carbonate, and this will lead to a pressure decrease, and I will show in the next slide as it looks like. By the way, this is the composition of the biogas, and here you see the carbon dioxide, but there's also one thing why you should use an OxiTop B head, because we have pressure corrosion resistant pressure sensors in there. Because of this nasty gas, biogas always, depending on the source and on the composition, it could have some hydrogen sulfide, and hydrogen sulfide is very corrosive to special pressure sensors, and for that we have a special pressure sensor which overcomes this. And here you see a typical curve of cow manure for biogas development. And after finishing the test, here you add these sodium hydroxide as CO2 absorbent, and you see a pressure decrease. And this pressure decrease, from this pressure decrease, you can calculate the amount of methane versus the carbon dioxide. But look, these are two different samples and measured with an OxiTop system. But last not least, these heads have more than the OxiTop the OxiTop C feature, the old OxiTop C feature. You can use these heads also for a standalone BOD without meter. So in case you want to have a quick BOD over 5 days and you don't want to read out the data, it's simply possible to use these heads also as a standalone, but only for a classical BOD 1 to 5. And a 1 to 7, excuse me, you can adjust the time. So this is a simply manual function on these heads. I just want to do this, that we have the full capability to show the full capability of these heads. Even if you see that you can do the results of BOD in milligram, we also have, for testing purposes, some additional measurements. So you can measure the absolute pressure, you can measure the differential pressure, and so on. This is what you can select with the heads. For BOD measurement, of course, you have fixed sample volumes, which you adjust in these heads. And you can also, when you start the measurement, you have the auto-temp function running, which is simply prevents wrong results if your samples have a temperature between 15 and 21 degrees. So your samples have to be, for BOD, of course, within this range of 15 to 21 degrees. Then this auto-temp function will make sure that you always get the correct results. Then you can, of course, check the measurement at the head itself. This is also possible for the if you have an IDS measurement, you can also go to a head and see the current value. Then you can read out the curves of the head just for checking. You get the final results after finishing the test, and you can, of course, terminate the measurement directly at the head. Then you have some additional settings. You can set the language at the head. You can do the illumination. Then you can have the control LD, which is, these are the different colors. So if the blinking, this is for all measurement. If the blinking is blue, the measurement is running. If you have a magenta blinking, then you know that now the head is available for radio transmission, so you can access the head by your Bluetooth connection. If the head is blinking green, then the measurement is done, and if it's blinking red, you should pay attention. This could be in case of the biogas measurement. This could be the overpressure, but this could also be a low battery warning. So, and of course, you can set the display off time. Interesting is the ID assignment, because this is also for the IDS measurement. You can give the heads an individual ID number. And this is interesting also because this ID number will be used also for the IDS measurement. So if your heads will be listed on your meter, you can easily identify them by this ID you have assigned to them. Then you can set time. This is also, by the way, this is done automatically if you start a measurement via the controller. And you can also update the head. This is also possible that we have firmware updates for the head. This can be done with a special function. And something internal for people who are using this head for BOD measurement, you can adjust the bottle volume, but this is something you should normally ignore. And this is the last thing which is very important for this, the so-called OxiTop PT. If you want to check a single head for its working, for the working of the pressure sensor, there's a small device, and the head will guide you through the procedure how to test this pressure sensor. This is only if you want to make sure that your pressure sensor is working correctly, and simply follow the steps of this procedure. Okay, for people who have already an old OxiTop C system, so there's everything you have for your OxiTop C system can be used. You can use the samples, you can use the platforms, you can use all accessories, you can use your thermal cabinets. This is no problem. For those who have an OxiTop C system working, please, I want to point out that we will stop selling the OxiTop C heads by end of the year. So if you need some, order them now. The thing is simply we don't have any controllers left. So make sure it's better to switch to the OxiTop IDS system, because this system will be the future for the next years. One thing is that we always, all the sets will be without meter, so please always order the meter if you buy a new OxiTop set, OxiTop IDS set. Okay, this is the technical specs. So we have, you see the different ranges, the different pressure ranges. You see the possibility for the BOD measurement in comparison to a normal BOD measurement. And very important, we have a new battery with a high capacity. It's a LS142050, which you can source easily via Amazon or or other sources. Here you see again the lifetime of the battery and the capacity of the heads. This is what we provide at different sets, and just please note, if you are ordering an OxiTop IDS set, please order the pellets, the sodium hydroxide separately. This is for dangerous good reasons, so we had to take them out of the delivery. So we also adjusted the prices accordingly. So please order the pellets separately if you are ordering an OxiTop IDS set. Okay, some reasons why should I buy this set? So I think this is a really versatile set for aerobic and anaerobic degradation. It's easy to use. Once you have understood the basic hierarchy, it's not a problem, and you can do with one system a lot of different tests. Then it's a modular system, so simply by changing the accessories, so the heads will stay the same. Simply changing the accessories, that means you can easily change the applications. This is especially interesting for all people who are working in laboratories, for external laboratories, which are doing tests for other companies, other factories. So this system can easily be expanded to any application. We have these long-term measuring principles, of stable measuring principles. This is pressure measurement. This is very easy, very reliable, and the heads will live for a long, long time. You have very low cost of ownership. You only have a few chemicals like these absorbents, and from time to time a battery, not more, not less. Then you can easily use the system also for EChem parameters simply by adding an IDS sensor, whatever you want, pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, or turbidity. So you have a unique system which covers respirometric tests and EChem tests in one unit. You have the data acquisition via PC. Well, okay, so I'm just 10 minutes over the time, so I apologize, but I hope I could give you a certain introduction on the system. And now I have the last question for our people who, of course, want to serve you and want to help you with the new OxiTop IDS system. So last question, do you want to have someone from Xylem to contact us to discuss on these OxiTop?
Thank you very much, Dr. Klaus, for your time with this presentation. Again, this was part 2 of Dr. Klaus's webinar. And if you are interested in listening to part 1, we do have it available on our website. But we'll just give you a few seconds to respond to this poll. All right, I think that should do it. And Dr. Klaus, could you please take us to the final slide?
Yes, of course. So if you now have any questions, so please tell us directly now or send them as an email. Then we will try to answer this in a certain time span. And of course, we will be glad to support you with your tasks and with your measuring task and your measuring problems, of course.
And it looks like we already have 3 questions queued up for you. And as Dr. Klaus mentioned, this Q&A session is open to the entire audience. Simply type your question into the question box in the control panel of your GoToWebinar interface. If you're too shy or you're not ready to ask your question or you would like to take this offline, as Dr. Klaus mentioned, There are 2 email addresses that are listed here on the screen, and you can contact us directly. And if we can't get to your question today, we will certainly follow up with your question offline and by contacting you directly to your email. So Dr. Klaus, let's start with the first question. Do we need to replace the sodium hydroxide pellets with every new measurement?
Yes, please. It's because they will be completely exhausted. So after you have finished your test, please empty the quiver, spill it out with fresh water, and then let it dry. And because it's not, the problem is there are 2 things. On the one thing, of course, the sodium carbonate will take away something of the capability of the left sodium hydroxide, and the second thing is that it's hydroscopic, so it will be filled with a mixture of water, of sodium hydroxide and sodium carbonate. And there's always the danger that it will flow over the small holes in the top of the quiver into the sample. And if this happens, sodium hydroxide in a biological active sample will kill everything.
Excellent, thank you for that. Let's move on quickly now to our next question. Is it necessary to get permission from a local government to use the OxiTop IDS?
Thank you for this question. So this is in fact something which is a bit difficult because of the Bluetooth connection. We have for all areas which are following the FCC and the CE guidelines, the systems can be used without any problems. For some other areas, there will be some approvals, some certificates necessary. This is what we will introduce step by step, but it's a slow process. So if you're not sure if you can use it, please ask us. The problem of certification is not that easy. For us, also not. If you have some local guidance, but I think this is more something for our Xylem partners, then we can try to find a way how to get a certification or an approval for the Bluetooth connection. But this has to be individually seen.
Yeah, so if you do have a question about certification concerning your specific region, yes, definitely reach out to us via email. And feel free to contact Dr. Klaus specifically or to the info.apac email address on your screen, and we'll definitely support you with this. All right, so our next question, Dr. Klaus, is can the OxiTop IDS head be provided together with a cable similar to the IDS electrode?
No, this would be not possible because simply think that you have in your sample 6 or 12 heads, so we cannot supply. We have no possibility to connect cables to that head. Not possible. I'm sorry. This is and the beauty of the wireless transmission, of course, is that you don't have cables anymore, and you can freely move the meter from place to place.
All right, and it looks like our final question here, we are tight for time. Is it possible to purchase the sodium hydroxide pellets locally instead of through WTW in Germany?
The problem is that these pellets should have a certain size. So if you once buy one of these pellets and you can see the size and you can weigh, then of course you can also source it locally, but make sure that's the same size, the same weight. Otherwise, there's always a problem that it could be lead to an underestimation of the values because of the less capability of the sodium, or if the capability of the sodium hydroxide pellets is too low, if they are too small. We had this in the past. So I know that problems. Then the people have a lower BOD than they expect. This would be the coming out of this if the absorbance is or the absorbance is too less.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Klaus. Let me sneak in one final question here. A member of our audience has asked, could you please send me the SOP for the BOD measurement?
The SOP of the BOD measurement, we have some ideas of a BOD measurement in our manual because it's the most common BOD measurement. We have also some application reports on our website for download, especially for BOD, where we have, for instance, the BOD of normal municipal wastewater. There's a certain application report that gives the steps.
So we can find that the SOP on the WTW website, is that correct?
It's on the application, yes, and it's an application report on BOD.
Okay, terrific. And of course, we will be responding to your questions offline. Either Dr. Klaus will respond to you directly or one of our regional sales representatives. And we will certainly send you a link to the SOP for your convenience. All right, well, I'm afraid we're out of time. There are a couple more questions in the list, but again, we will follow up with you offline. So rest assured there will be a response coming. And I'd like to thank everybody for their time and for joining us at this part for the second part of our OxiTop webinar. And again, if you missed the first part, you're more than welcome to view it at your own convenience. We have the recording available on our website at www.xylem-analytics.asia. There will also be some contact information for you in the follow-up email, which will be coming out in approximately 30 to 60 minutes. So Dr. Klaus, thank you so much for your time. Would you like to say the final words?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce our new system. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we can support you with your measuring tasks. And feel free to ask us, as Michael said, send an email and to the info address or send an email directly to me. I will try to respond as soon as possible. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.